You ever just look at a giant skyscraper or a sprawling new airport and just wonder, how in the world does something that huge, that complex actually get built? Well, today we are pulling back the curtain on what I like to call the conductor secret. It's the hidden system that turns absolute chaos into a symphony of construction. So let's just jump right into the big question here. How do you get 100, maybe more, different companies, literally thousands of people and millions of individual parts, to all come together and build one single thing perfectly? I mean, when you think about it, it seems completely impossible, right? And that's because, without a very specific system in place, it is impossible. So that's what we're tackling in our first section, looking at megaprojects as a kind of controlled chaos. To really get this, let's use a metaphor. Think of a giant construction project, like a world-class orchestra. You've got all these incredible musicians, the steelworkers, the electricians, the engineers. But what happens if they all show up with different sheet music and just start playing whenever they feel like it? You don't get a symphony. You get an expensive, deafening mess. And believe me, that kind of mess has some serious, real-world consequences. When that coordination breaks down, you get massive schedule delays, costs just balloon out of control, the quality of the final construction is lower, and you end up with these long-term operational problems and constant arguments over who was supposed to do what. This isn't just a possibility. It's pretty much what's guaranteed to happen without a plan. So how do the most successful projects on the planet avoid this disaster? Well, they have a conductor. And that conductor has a secret weapon. So let's dive into what that is. The secret, it turns out, is something called interface management, or IM for short. Now, the official definition is kind of dry, I'll admit. The management of communications, relationships, and deliverables among two or more interface stakeholders. Okay, sounds like corporate jargon, but stick with me because what this system actually does is pretty incredible. So let's just break that down. Put simply, interface management is the shared rulebook for the entire orchestra. It's a system designed from the ground up to make absolutely sure that every single person's puzzle piece fits together perfectly. So what's actually in this rulebook? How does it all work when the boots hit the ground? That brings us to the rules of connection. So the whole system starts by identifying every single connection point, what they call an interface. And it turns out there are two main types. On one hand, you have hard interfaces. These are the physical things you can actually touch, where a steel beam bolts onto a column or a pipe connects to a pump. But then you have soft interfaces. These are all about information. Things like sharing design criteria, getting the right regulatory permits, or even just managing communication between teams that speak different languages. And both are absolutely crucial. Now, to manage every single one of those connection points, teams use a special tool, the Interface Agreement, or IA. The best way to think of this is like a mini contract for every connection. It's a formal, documented agreement between two teams that spells out exactly what needs to be delivered, when it's due, and who specifically is responsible. Nothing is left to chance. And the process for creating one of these agreements is super structured. As you can see, one team makes a request, it becomes a formal agreement, it gets sent for review, and the two sides negotiate until everyone accepts the terms. But here's the most critical part. The entire process is time-bound. This is what prevents a simple question from getting buried in an inbox and delaying a billion-dollar project for weeks. I know, this probably sounds like a ton of paperwork, but the reason everyone does it is because the payoff is, well, it's staggering. And that brings us to the multi-billion-dollar reason this all matters. Okay, check this out. The data from the Construction Industry Institute really tells the whole story. On projects with a low level of this kind of management, costs grew by an average of over 18%. But on projects with a high level, a strong system, costs grew by just 3.7%. The difference is just massive. Yeah, let that sink in for a second. The research found that projects with a high level of IM implementation have, and this is a quote, almost 5 times better performance in terms of cost growth. We're not talking about a small improvement here. It's a total game changer. So what's the return on that investment? Well,
The research suggests that for every single dollar you spend setting up a really good interface management system, you save $5 in cost overruns, a 5-to-1 return. That's incredible.
Okay, let's make that really concrete. Imagine a $10 billion mega project. A tiny investment of just $20 million, that's less than 1% of the budget, on a world-class IM system could prevent over $1 billion in cost overruns. That is the power of a well-conducted orchestra.
But of course, a system is only as good as the people who are running it. So for our last section, let's talk about the people behind the plan. Let's meet the conductor. The lead role here is the interface manager. This person is the project's maestro, its conductor. They're the one who develops the master plan, who oversees every single one of those thousands of connection points, and who makes sure that all the different teams are actually talking to each other effectively. At the end of the day, the interface manager and their team are the human element that makes this whole thing sing. They are the ones standing at the front, guiding hundreds of individual players to make sure they all perform one single, harmonious symphony of construction.
So the next time you see a brand new bridge or a massive power plant or a skyscraper that seems to touch the clouds, don't just see the steel in the glass. Stop for a second and ask yourself, can you hear the music? Will you listen for the symphony?